It's strange, the way grief works. The pain doesn't always hit you all at once. Sometimes, it comes in waves, each one more forceful than the last, crashing against you, drowning you a little more with every passing second. But other times, it's like a dull ache that lingers in the back of your mind, refusing to let go, gnawing away at you, piece by piece. That was the kind of grief I felt the day of Kevin's funeral. It wasn't the explosive kind that leaves you crying uncontrollably in front of everyone. No, it was a slow, creeping pain that stayed with me throughout the entire service, through the eulogy, through the silent prayers, and beyond. As I stood at the front of that church, staring at the small wooden casket that held my son, I felt my world slowly unravel. Kevin had been my only son. My pride and joy. He was only 28 when he passed. Too young. Too full of life to be taken away from me so suddenly. And yet, there he was, lying in front of me, his body still, his eyes closed forever. I didn't want to believe it. I still don't, if I'm being honest. There are days, even now, when I wake up and expect to hear him shouting down the hallway, making a joke, or asking me to help him with something. But that day, that cold autumn afternoon, was the day I had to face the reality of his death. The funeral was small. Kevin hadn't had many close friends, but those who did show up were kind enough. Most of them had drifted away over the years, but a few still stayed in touch, mostly through social media or occasional meetups. I had never been particularly close with any of them, but that didn't matter. They were here for Kevin, and that was all that mattered. My ex-wife, Diane, was there, of course. We hadn't been married for over a decade, but Kevin's death brought us back together, in a way. There was still some unspoken bond between us, even if we no longer loved each other. I could see it in her eyes as she sat in the front pew, her face etched with grief. We had both lost something we would never get back. But there was someone else there, standing by the door, that I hadn't expected. Carla. My daughter-in-law. Kevin's wife. She was standing there, not crying, but staring blankly at the reception table, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Carla had always been a bit distant. I don't know if it was her upbringing or just her personality, but she never seemed to care much for family gatherings. Kevin, on the other hand, had always tried to maintain some kind of connection. He would send her flowers on birthdays, ask her to join us for holidays, but she would always make some excuse or find a reason not to show up. And now, at his funeral, she stood there like a stranger. I don't know why, but that moment, seeing her just, standing there, it unsettled me. I walked over to her, hesitant, not sure what to say. I had seen her in passing since Kevin's death, but only briefly. The woman I once considered part of my family, the one I had watched walk down the aisle and marry my son, now seemed like an entirely different person. Carla, I said, my voice soft, unsure. How are you holding up? Is there anything I can do for you? She didn't immediately respond. For a long time, she just stared at the flowers on the table, her face unreadable. It was almost as if I wasn't even there. But then, slowly, she turned her head toward me, her eyes colder than I had ever seen them. I'm fine, she said sharply, her voice flat and devoid of any emotion. You should go. You don't belong here anymore. The words hit me like a slap across the face. I couldn't comprehend them at first. I stood there, frozen, not able to make sense of what she had just said. What do you mean? I asked, feeling my pulse quicken. I'm Kevin's father. I have every right to be here. Carla didn't blink. Her eyes were ice cold, as though she had already decided what this moment would be. No, you don't, she snapped, cutting me off. Kevin's dead, and that means everything's mine now. You're not part of this anymore. You're not family. You never were. I took a step back, the shock of her words landing like a heavy blow. What was she saying? What had happened between the two of them that I had missed? I had known there were tensions, but this was something else entirely. I couldn't process it. You don't have the right to say that, I said, my voice cracking with a mix of anger and disbelief. You're his wife. But I'm his father, Carla. I was here before you were, and I'll be here long after you're gone. Her lips twisted into a cold, emotionless smile. You don't get it, do you? She said, her voice now low and menacing. I'm the one who matters now. I'm the one who gets everything, and you can go. I looked around the room, at the people still lingering near the back, talking in hushed tones. Not one person stepped forward to say anything, to stop her. They just watched, waiting, perhaps too afraid to interfere. Carla turned away then, brushing past me as if I were nothing more than a shadow. She walked toward a group of her family members, all of them turning to look at me with silent, judging eyes. And just like that, I was dismissed. Thrown away, not just by her, but by the entire family. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, unable to move. My son had just been buried, and already, I was being erased from his life. But I would not be silenced. Not by her. Not by anyone. The anger started to bubble up inside me, slow and steady, like a rising tide. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, or how I was going to do it, but I knew one thing for sure, I was not going to let her take everything from me. Not my son's memory. Not the life we shared. Not my place in this world. And so, I began to plan. I left the funeral early that day. I had to. The place, the people, all of it had become too much to bear. I couldn't stand the idea of being surrounded by strangers who were all acting as though nothing had changed, as though my son had never existed. Worse yet, Carla's cold dismissal lingered in my mind, gnawing at me like a persistent itch. She hadn't just rejected me in that moment. She had also taken something from me, something precious. My connection to Kevin, my right as his father, had been ripped away. I remember driving home in a daze, my mind spinning with the words she had said. You're not family. You never were. How could she say that? How could she turn on me so completely? I knew their marriage hadn't been perfect, but I never imagined it was this bad. What had Kevin told her, if anything? What had she done to him that made her feel so entitled to everything? When I got home, I sat in the quiet of the living room, staring at the pictures of Kevin and me on the walls. There we were, laughing together at his high school graduation, or fishing on the lake, or sitting on the porch of the house we had built together. Those were the memories that kept me going, the moments that I clung to when the grief threatened to overwhelm me. But now, all of that seemed irrelevant. Carla had drawn a line, and I needed to know why. The first step was obvious. I had to talk to her. But I knew she wouldn't just let me waltz in and demand answers. No, I had to be more careful. I couldn't let her see me coming. So, I began to investigate. I went through Kevin's things. Not out of some desperate need to rummage through his belongings, but because I needed to understand who my son had been in those final years. I needed to understand what had changed in their relationship, what secrets Carla might have hidden. Maybe there was a note. A letter. Anything that would shed some light on what had happened. Kevin had always been meticulous with his paperwork. He'd kept receipts, journals, even old love letters from when he was a teenager. I found his old filing cabinet in the study, tucked away in a corner of the room. I pulled out the top drawer and sifted through the contents. Bills, bank statements, insurance papers. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then, halfway through, I came across a small, unmarked envelope. It was thick, the kind that might hold something important. I opened it cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside was a letter, handwritten in Kevin's familiar scrawl. I unfolded it and began to read. Dad. If you're reading this, then I guess you already know about the situation with Carla. I'm not sure how to start this, but you need to know the truth. She's not who you think she is. She's never been the person I thought she was. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, but I was afraid of what it might mean. I've tried to make it work with her, but every day I feel like I'm losing myself. I don't know what she wants, but it's not love. The letter went on, detailing Kevin's struggles with Carla over the past few years. He spoke of how her behavior had become increasingly controlling, how she had isolated him from his friends and family, and how she had started to manipulate him into cutting ties with anyone who tried to offer him support. But it wasn't just emotional abuse. There were hints of something darker, something that I couldn't fully comprehend yet. I sat there, stunned, the weight of his words pressing down on me. My son had been suffering, and I hadn't known. How had I missed it? How had I been so blind? And now, he was gone, and I was left to pick up the pieces. But something else caught my eye at the bottom of the letter. A name. Terry. If something happens to me, find Terry. He'll know more. Terry. Who the hell was Terry? I had never heard of him before. I put the letter down and leaned back in my chair, trying to process what I had just read. Kevin had been in trouble, and he had known it. He had known that something was wrong, that his life with Carla was spiraling out of control. But he hadn't told me. He hadn't told anyone. I needed to find this Terry, whoever he was. And I needed to find him fast. I had a feeling that Terry was the key to understanding the full extent of what had happened. The next morning, I went through Kevin's phone records. I wasn't proud of it, but at that moment, I didn't care about privacy or boundaries. I needed answers. There was a name that kept popping up in his texts, a number I didn't recognize, but it appeared frequently, especially in the months leading up to his death. I made a call, my hand shaking slightly as I dialed the number. It rang for a while before a voice finally answered. Hello. The voice was deep, gravelly. A man. Is this Terry? I asked, my voice a little firmer than I felt. Yeah, this is Terry. Who's this? My name is John. I'm Kevin's father. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. I could tell he was processing what I'd said. What do you want? He asked, his voice guarded. I need to know what happened to my son. Kevin, he was married to Carla, and something wasn't right. He left me a letter with your name in it. He said you would know what happened. Another long pause. Then, a slow sigh. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, Terry said finally. But Kevin was right. Carla, she had him trapped. She's dangerous, John. You don't know the half of it. I don't know how much Kevin told you, but the stuff I saw, the things she did, it's not something you can just walk away from. I felt my heart race. This was it. I was finally getting closer to the truth. But I also knew that it wasn't going to be easy to hear. What did she do? I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to remain calm. Terry didn't answer immediately. When he spoke again, his voice was low, almost a whisper. I'll tell you everything. But not over the phone. Meet me tomorrow. You need to see it for yourself. The next day, I drove out to the diner Terry had suggested we meet at. It was a small, run-down place on the outskirts of town, far enough from the bustle of the city to feel like a place where secrets could be shared without anyone noticing. I arrived early, my nerves on edge, unsure of what I was about to uncover. What could Terry possibly know that Kevin hadn't already written in his letter? But the fact that Kevin had mentioned him, and the way he spoke about Carla, made me realize that there were things beneath the surface that I didn't even want to acknowledge. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside, and I immediately spotted Terry in the corner booth. He was a tall man with broad shoulders, rough hands, and a face that had clearly seen its share of hard times. He didn't look much like someone who would be hiding a secret, but then again, I had learned the hard way that people were rarely what they seemed. He looked up when I walked in, giving me a nod. His eyes were tired, heavy, as though the weight of his knowledge had been wearing him down for a long time. I slid into the booth across from him and didn't waste time with pleasantries. You said you had information about Carla. What's going on? Terry leaned back in his seat, folding his arms across his chest. For a moment, he didn't say anything, just stared at me as though measuring whether or not I was truly ready to hear the truth. You're not going to like this, John, he said finally, his voice low. But you need to know everything if you want to understand what really happened to your son. My heart pounded in my chest. Tell me. Terry took a deep breath, his eyes darting around the diner as though making sure no one else could hear. Carla's not who you think she is. She's not the woman Kevin married. She's been lying to you, to everyone, for years. But I don't think Kevin ever realized the full extent of it. He was too deep in it by the time he figured things out. And by then, it was too late. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the table. What are you talking about? What do you mean, too late? Terry glanced down at the table, his fingers tapping lightly against the wood. I've known Carla for a long time. Long before she even met Kevin. She was always like this, controlling, manipulative. But what I didn't realize until recently was just how dangerous she could be. You see, Carla wasn't interested in Kevin because she loved him. She was interested in him because of his inheritance. My stomach twisted at the mention of money. Kevin's inheritance had been substantial. Not just from me, but from his mother's side as well. We were far from rich, but the life insurance and the family estate were enough to make her dangerous, to give her the power to manipulate and control. Kevin had money? I asked, trying to hold back the anger rising in my chest. But he never said anything about it. Exactly, Terry replied, shaking his head. He never did. She made sure of that. She knew that if he found out the truth about what he was really entitled to, he might wake up and realize what she'd been doing all along. I felt the ground beneath me shift. What are you saying? That Carla was after his money? But why would she marry him if she didn't care about him? Terry's eyes flickered with something dark, something he wasn't ready to share. Because she had a plan. She used Kevin to get to the inheritance, but that wasn't the only thing. She was looking for something bigger. Something that could set her up for life. And she wasn't going to stop until she had it. I sat back in the booth, the words hanging heavy in the air. My son, the boy I had raised, the man I had been so proud of, he had been trapped by this woman. He had been deceived, and now, she had taken everything from him. And from me. Do you know what she did to him? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Terry looked me in the eye, his face grim. She had him convinced that everyone was out to get him. That his family didn't care about him. She isolated him from all of us. She convinced him to sever ties, to stop reaching out for help. It was part of her control. But it wasn't just that. She also made sure he couldn't escape from her without losing everything. I felt the rage well up inside me, the same feeling I had when I first heard Carla's words at the funeral. The anger was raw and immediate, but it wasn't just anger at her. It was at myself too, for not seeing what had been happening right in front of me. Why didn't you tell him? I asked. Why didn't you warn him? I tried, Terry said, his voice thick with regret. I tried to talk to him. But Carla always made sure we never got a chance. And when he finally started to wake up to what she was doing, he didn't have anyone left to turn to. I sat there in silence for a long moment, my mind spinning. The truth was too much to process all at once. But I couldn't stop now. I had to keep going. For Kevin. So what happens now? I asked, feeling a sense of determination surge within me. Terry hesitated, then leaned forward, his voice low. There's more. I don't think you understand just how deep this goes. Carla's been hiding things that she's kept from you, from Kevin, and from everyone. You're going to need to dig deeper, John. And when you do, you'll see that nothing is what it seems. I looked at Terry, my mind racing. What do you mean by that? What exactly are you saying? Terry didn't answer immediately. He looked at me for a long, tense moment, then stood up. You'll find out soon enough. But you need to be careful. Carla won't let you get away with this. She'll do whatever it takes to keep her secrets hidden. Before I could say anything else, Terry walked out of the diner, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I stayed there for a while, trying to piece together what I had learned. Carla's manipulation, her control, her lies, it was all starting to make sense now. But there was more. I could feel it, deep down. And I knew I wasn't going to stop until I had uncovered every last secret she was hiding. After meeting with Terry, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was just scratching the surface. Terry had given me a glimpse into a world I hadn't known existed, a world where my son had been trapped in a web of lies and manipulation. But the information he had given me was still incomplete. It was as if I had been handed pieces of a puzzle, but the most crucial pieces were still missing. I couldn't let this go. I wouldn't. Kevin deserved justice, and so did I. Carla had taken my son from me, and now she was trying to erase him from existence. I needed to know everything, about the inheritance, about the secrets she was hiding, about the life Kevin had led behind closed doors. But I knew that if I was going to get to the bottom of this, I needed to approach it carefully. Carla wasn't going to make this easy for me. For the next few days, I spent my time combing through every piece of information I could find. I went through Kevin's old emails, his bank statements, his phone records, all the things I had neglected to check before. I had no idea what I was looking for, but I hoped something would jump out at me. A pattern. A clue. Anything. And then, one evening, it happened. I was going through a stack of old documents Kevin had kept in a drawer in his office when I came across a strange, unmarked envelope. It was small, no bigger than a standard letter, but it was thick, too thick to be just a regular piece of paper. I hesitated for a moment before opening it, my fingers trembling. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a letter this time, but a contract. A legal document. My heart skipped a beat as I looked it over. The terms were clear, it was an inheritance agreement, but not one I had ever seen before. In fact, I had no idea how Kevin had come to sign it. The document outlined a series of stipulations, one in particular caught my eye. It was a clause that stated that upon his death, all of Kevin's assets would be transferred to Carla, provided she met certain conditions. Conditions that Kevin had never told me about. The terms were vague, but they were unmistakable. Carla was to receive everything, including the life insurance, the property, and even his share of the family estate. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. What was this? How had Kevin signed this? Why had he never told me about it? I couldn't believe it. Carla had manipulated him into signing this agreement, using her control over him to secure everything for herself. But that wasn't the worst part. As I read through the document again, I noticed something even more disturbing. The agreement had been signed just a few weeks before Kevin's death. He had been coerced into this, I was sure of it. And now, with him gone, Carla was going to claim everything. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. This contract was the key to understanding everything that had happened. But I couldn't just confront Carla without being prepared. I needed to find out how this document had come into existence, who had written it, and what else Carla had hidden. I had to find a way to use this against her. I called Terry again, my mind still reeling from what I had just discovered. He didn't answer, so I left a voicemail, telling him I needed to meet. But then, a thought occurred to me. What if Terry wasn't the only one who knew about this contract? What if Carla had shared it with someone else? Maybe there was a way to track down the person who had written it, or the lawyer who had overseen it. Maybe there was a way to get more information, more proof that Kevin had been taken advantage of. The next day, I went to Kevin's lawyer's office. I had no idea what I was going to find, but I knew I had to start somewhere. The lawyer, a man named Richard Holloway, had handled Kevin's affairs for years. If anyone would know about the contract, it would be him. I arrived at his office just after noon, the air thick with tension. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I knew that this wasn't going to be an easy conversation. The receptionist greeted me with a polite smile, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. "Mr. Holloway is expecting you," she said after a moment, her voice too controlled. "He's in his office." I nodded, trying to keep my composure as I walked down the hallway to the lawyer's office. When I knocked on the door, Holloway's voice came from inside, asking me to come in. I stepped into the room, and Holloway stood up from behind his desk, offering me a firm handshake. He was a tall man, in his late 50s, with sharp features and a businesslike demeanor. His glasses perched on the edge of his nose as he studied me carefully. "Mr. Winters," he said, his voice cool but not unkind. "I'm sorry for your loss. How can I help you today?" I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I need to know about Kevin's will. Specifically, the inheritance agreement he signed a few weeks ago. The one with Carla." Holloway's face tightened at the mention of Carla's name. He hesitated for a moment before sitting back down behind his desk. "I'm afraid I can't discuss specifics of my client's affairs with anyone other than the beneficiary. You'll have to speak with Carla about that." I felt the anger rise in my chest. "I'm Kevin's father. I have a right to know what's going on." Holloway didn't flinch. "I understand your frustration, Mr. Winters. But legal matters are delicate. I can't just hand out information on a whim. If you want to discuss this further, you'll need to speak with Carla." I could feel the walls closing in around me. This wasn't going to be easy. But I couldn't stop now. Not after everything I had uncovered. Before I could say anything else, Holloway leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I will say this much. Kevin wasn't in his right mind when he signed that agreement. He wasn't the same person you knew, Mr. Winters. Carla, she had a hold on him. But the rest? That's something you'll need to figure out on your own." With those words, Holloway stood, signaling that the conversation was over. I left his office feeling more lost than ever. It wasn't just Carla anymore. There were other forces at play, forces that had been quietly manipulating Kevin for far longer than I realized. I was starting to understand that this was bigger than I thought. And I was running out of time. The meeting with Richard Holloway left me feeling more unsettled than ever. I had learned something I hadn't expected. Kevin had been in a fragile state when he signed the inheritance agreement. It wasn't just Carla's cold manipulation that had influenced him, there was something more. Holloway had hinted at it but hadn't provided enough information to satisfy me. What had driven Kevin to this point? What had made him so vulnerable to Carla's control? I left the lawyer's office with a sense of urgency. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. But as I walked back to my car, the reality of the situation started to settle in. I was alone in this. Carla had everyone in her corner, her family, her friends, even the lawyer who had managed Kevin's estate. I couldn't trust anyone. And the more I learned, the more I realized how deeply Carla's influence had seeped into every aspect of my son's life. It wasn't just the inheritance. She had shaped everything. I tried calling Terry again, but there was no answer. I left him a voicemail, urging him to meet with me as soon as possible. But the truth was, I wasn't sure if I could trust him either. How much did he really know? How much of this was just him speculating? For the next few days, I sat at home, going over every piece of information I had gathered. I went through Kevin's phone records again, scrutinizing every detail, searching for any clue that might help me piece together what had happened. And then, something caught my eye. It was a text message, dated a week before Kevin's death. It wasn't to Carla, it was from a number I didn't recognize. The message was short, just a few lines, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. "The money's been transferred. You can't back out now. If you do, you'll lose everything. Carla will never let you go. My heart raced as I stared at the words on the screen. What was this? What money? Was this related to the inheritance agreement? And why was this person threatening Kevin? It was clear from the message that something had gone terribly wrong. I tried calling the number, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message, but I wasn't expecting a response. I had no idea who this person was, but I knew they were tied to this mess. I had to find them. I decided to take a different approach. I went to the address listed on Kevin's most recent bank statements. There was a small apartment building on the outskirts of town, and according to the records, that's where the money had been transferred. It wasn't much of a lead, but it was the only one I had. The building was older, run down, with peeling paint and a flickering light over the entrance. It looked like the kind of place where people went to hide. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to find there, but I had to see it for myself. I walked up the narrow staircase, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. I found the apartment number listed on the records, number 3B. It was at the end of the hall, and as I approached, I saw a shadow move behind the frosted glass of the door. Someone was inside. I knocked. The sound was sharp and loud in the silence of the hallway. A few moments passed before the door creaked open, revealing a man in his mid-30s, unshaven and wearing a worn-out hoodie. He looked at me, his expression wary but not entirely surprised. "Yes?" he asked, his voice low. "I'm looking for information about a transaction." "Kevin Winters. He made a payment to you. I need to know what it was for." The man eyed me for a long moment before stepping back to let me inside. I hesitated, but something in his eyes told me that I wasn't going to get anything useful standing out in the hall. Inside, the apartment was small, cramped, with little furniture and a faint smell of stale cigarettes in the air. The man motioned for me to sit on the couch, but I remained standing, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of what was going on. "What do you want to know?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to know what Kevin was involved in. What kind of deal did he make? What's this about a payment?" The man sighed and rubbed his forehead, clearly uncomfortable. "Listen, I don't know what you think is going on, but Kevin was in way over his head. He got involved with people he shouldn't have. He made a deal, yeah, but he didn't understand the consequences. That's all I can tell you. He made a payment to settle some debts, and that was the end of it." I stepped closer, my frustration mounting. "Who were these people, and what kind of debts? You're telling me Kevin, my son, was in debt to some criminals?" The man shifted uncomfortably on the couch, clearly avoiding my gaze. "I didn't say that. But there were some bad people involved, people who don't let you walk away once you're in. Kevin thought he could get out, but it didn't work that way." I clenched my fists, my anger bubbling to the surface. "What do you mean? What happened?" He hesitated again, his eyes darting around the room, as though he was trying to decide whether to tell me the truth. "You don't know the whole story. Kevin got mixed up with a group that, well, they don't play by the rules. Carla's been pulling the strings for a long time, but she wasn't working alone. There's more to this than just the inheritance. If you really want to know, you need to be careful. These people don't forget, and they don't forgive." My mind was racing. Carla, criminal connections, debts, threats, everything I thought I knew about my son's life had just been turned upside down. But the most disturbing part of it all was that Carla was at the center of it. She wasn't just manipulating Kevin for money, she was connected to something far darker. I had to get out of there. Fast. As I turned to leave, the man called out after me. "Don't say I didn't warn you. If you go down this path, there's no going back. Carla's dangerous, more than you know." I didn't need him to tell me that. I already knew. As I dug deeper into the underworld Carla had dragged my son into, the truth became too much to ignore. It was time to take a stand, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. I spent the next few days consumed by the new information. The connection to the criminal underworld, the debts, the shady people Kevin had gotten mixed up with, it was all too much to process in one go. And yet, there was no denying it. Carla wasn't just a manipulative wife. She was a key player in a much darker game, and my son had been a pawn in it all along. Terry's warning echoed in my mind, the words, "Be careful," repeating like a mantra. But I couldn't stop now. Not when I was so close to the truth. I had already lost my son. The least I could do was make sure Carla didn't walk away unscathed, that she didn't get away with tearing apart our family for her own gain. I had made a decision, I was going to confront her. But I wasn't going to do it blindly. I needed more than just accusations. I needed proof. I needed a way to bring everything into the open, to expose Carla for the liar, the manipulator, the criminal she truly was. The first step was obvious. I needed to find out more about the people Carla was working with. The man in the apartment had given me a lead, but I had no idea where to start. So, I did what any desperate father would do, I followed the money. Kevin's bank records had shown several large withdrawals and transfers leading up to his death, all to an account that Carla had access to. But what really caught my eye was the pattern of payments. It wasn't just to pay off debts, there were several payments to a company I didn't recognize. The name of the company was vague, just an LLC with a P.O. box in another state. But the payments had been consistent, and they had been substantial. I knew I had to go there. I had to find out what this company was, who was behind it, and how it was connected to Carla. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed someone who knew the ropes, someone who could help me navigate the murky world I was about to step into. That's when I called an old friend of mine, Mike. Mike had been in law enforcement for years before he retired early. He wasn't the type to get involved in family drama, but he owed me a favor, one that I had called in a long time ago. If there was anyone who could help me dig into this LLC and find out what it was really about, it was Mike. He agreed to meet me the next day, and we sat down in his office, a small, unassuming place in a quiet part of town. Mike wasn't the type to ask too many questions, and I appreciated that. He knew better than to pry into personal matters. He just wanted to help. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it, John," Mike said as we went over the details. "This is going to get ugly. Whatever's going on here, it's not going to be something you can just walk away from. But I can help you find the answers you're looking for." I nodded, trying to hide the anxiety that was creeping up on me. "I'm not backing down, Mike. I can't." He studied me for a long moment before pulling up his computer. "All right, let's see what we can find on this LLC. We'll start with the basics: who owns it, where it's registered, and who's behind it. Then we'll dig deeper." I watched as Mike typed away, his fingers moving quickly over the keyboard. I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of hope and dread. On one hand, I was finally getting closer to the truth, but on the other, I knew that once the truth came out, there would be no turning back. After a few minutes, Mike leaned back in his chair, his face darkening as he read the screen. Well, he muttered. "This is interesting. The LLC is registered in a state that's known for having very lax laws when it comes to financial transactions. But that's not the real kicker. Take a look at this." He turned the screen toward me. There, in black and white, was the name of the registered owner. It wasn't Carla. It was someone I didn't recognize, a name I had never heard before. But what really shook me was the address listed for this person. It was an address I knew all too well, an address that led straight to the heart of the criminal world I had been trying to avoid. The same place that Terry had warned me about. This person, whoever they were, had a direct connection to the people Carla was involved with. And now, I was in deeper than I had ever been before. "This isn't just about money," Mike said, his voice serious. "There's a lot more going on here than you realize. You need to be careful. You're playing with fire now." I didn't need Mike to tell me that. I had known it all along. But I couldn't back out now. Not when I was so close. The walls were closing in, and the only way out was through. We made a plan. Mike would use his contacts to dig further into the LLC and the people behind it. In the meantime, I would keep an eye on Carla, see if I could catch her slipping, if I could catch her in a lie. Every move she made now felt like a piece of the puzzle falling into place. But as I left Mike's office that day, I felt a sense of unease wash over me. I knew that I couldn't trust anyone, least of all Carla. She had been playing me for years, hiding behind her charm, manipulating everything and everyone she touched. But I also knew one thing: no matter what it took, I was going to expose her. I wasn't just going to let her walk away from this. Not after everything she'd done. The days leading up to the confrontation felt like an eternity. Mike had managed to gather some more information about the LLC and the people involved, but it wasn't enough. I knew I was playing a dangerous game, one where every move could be my last. But I couldn't stop. Carla had taken everything from me, my son, my peace of mind, and now, she was about to lose it all. I had decided to confront her at her apartment, the place where so many of the lies had begun. The place where she had woven her web of control around Kevin. I wasn't sure what to expect when I showed up, but I knew that this would be the beginning of the end. I stood in front of her door, my heart pounding in my chest. The evidence I had gathered, the contract, the mysterious payments, the criminal connections, all of it was going to come crashing down around her. But the question was, how would she react? I took a deep breath and knocked. The sound echoed in the hallway, and I immediately regretted not preparing myself for what was to come. I waited for a moment, then knocked again, a little louder this time. The door swung open, and there she stood. Carla. She hadn't changed at all. The same cold, calculating look in her eyes. The same smile that always made you feel like you were beneath her, that she was in control. Well, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. What brings you here, John? Come to beg me for mercy? Or maybe you've finally realized how far out of your league you are. I didn't let her taunt affect me. I couldn't. Not now. I'm not here to beg, Carla, I said, my voice steady. I'm here to expose the truth. Everything you've been hiding. Her smile faltered for just a second, but she quickly regained her composure. The truth? Oh, please. Spare me the melodrama. If you've come to accuse me of something, I suggest you get to the point. I stepped forward, holding up the envelope with the signed contract. This is what you've been hiding, isn't it? The inheritance agreement that you manipulated Kevin into signing. Carla's eyes narrowed as she looked at the document. Her lips twisted into a smirk. You think that's going to do anything? You think that's going to change anything? I think it's enough to make people listen, I said, my voice colder now. I think it's enough to show just how far you've gone to control everything in Kevin's life. But it's not just the contract, is it? You've been working with people, dangerous people. People who don't care about you or Kevin. They only care about the money. And you've been playing them for fools. For the first time, I saw something flash in her eyes, fear. It was gone in an instant, but I saw it. I had her cornered. You don't know what you're talking about, she snapped, her voice rising. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Oh, I think I do, I said, my voice growing more confident. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. You're not just a wife who lost her husband. You're a criminal. A manipulator. And you used Kevin to get what you wanted. Her face turned pale. You don't know the first thing about me. I know enough, I shot back. I know about the debts you forced Kevin to pay. The people you've been hiding behind. I know about the LLC. I know about the money. Carla took a step back, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for the doorframe. This is ridiculous. You have no proof of any of this. You can't just waltz in here and accuse me of these things. I already have the proof, I said. And you know it. But the thing is, Carla, you've been so focused on controlling Kevin, on controlling everything around you, that you never thought anyone would figure it out. You thought you were untouchable. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she seemed to gather herself, standing a little taller, straightening her posture. You really think you can take me down, don't you? You think this little piece of paper, is going to ruin everything I've worked for? I stepped closer to her, my heart beating faster. I don't think it'll ruin everything, Carla. But it'll ruin you. You'll never be able to walk away from this. Not after what you've done. For a moment, I thought she might break down, but instead, she laughed, a harsh, bitter laugh that sent a chill through me. You really are clueless, she said, her voice laced with venom. You think you can expose me, that you can make people care about what you've uncovered. No one cares, John. No one cares about the truth. You think anyone's going to believe you over me? I've already made sure of that. I didn't know what she meant, not at first. But then, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. I turned, my eyes widening as a group of men appeared from the hallway, surrounding me. I hadn't seen them enter, but they were there now, tall, intimidating, and dressed in dark clothing. Carla stepped forward, her smirk returning. You didn't think I'd let you walk away from this, did you? You really think I'd let you ruin everything I've worked for? The men moved closer, and I felt a wave of panic wash over me. Carla had planned for this moment. She had known I'd come. She had prepared for my confrontation. And now, it seemed, I was the one who had underestimated her. You're going to regret this, I said, my voice now more uncertain than I would have liked. But I refused to show fear. I couldn't. Not now. Carla looked at me with a coldness I hadn't seen before. No, John. You're the one who's going to regret this. You're the one who's going to lose. Before I could say anything else, one of the men grabbed me by the arm, pulling me toward the door. Let me go. I shouted, trying to free myself. But the grip on my arm was like steel. Carla stood behind them, watching, as if the entire scene was nothing more than entertainment to her. You should have stayed out of it, she said, her voice almost pitying. Now, you've made your choice. And you're going to pay for it. The moment they dragged me out of the apartment, I knew things had gone from bad to worse. My heart raced in my chest as I struggled against the grip of the man holding me. My mind screamed for an escape, for some way to break free. But Carla had planned this, and it was too late to turn back. The men, at least 4 of them, I counted, escorted me down the hall, one holding me by the arm, the others flanking me on either side. I glanced over my shoulder at Carla, standing by the door with that same smug, superior look on her face. She had won. Or at least, that's what she thought. I was dragged down the staircase and out into the parking lot behind the building, the men's rough hands still clutching me. They shoved me into a car parked by the curb. The engine roared to life as we sped away, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of helplessness wash over me. Where were they taking me? What were they going to do to me? I tried to calm myself, tried to think logically. There had to be a way out of this. Carla might have thought she had all the control, but there were still pieces of this puzzle I hadn't uncovered. I wasn't entirely powerless. We drove for what felt like an eternity. The car wound through side streets, and I lost track of the route. The city lights blurred into the night, and for a moment, I thought I might be lost for good. But then, the car slowed, and the engine turned off. My heart skipped a beat. We had arrived at some abandoned warehouse, isolated, quiet, the kind of place you'd expect to find if someone were trying to hide a body. The men shoved me out of the car and forced me inside, where the dim light barely illuminated the cold, concrete floor. I looked around, trying to find any hint of an exit, but there was none. Sit, one of them growled, pushing me toward a rusted chair in the center of the room. I complied, though my mind was racing. I had to think. I had to find a way to turn the tables on them. The last thing I wanted was to go down without a fight. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry. Angry at Carla. Angry at myself for not seeing the signs sooner. And I was going to make sure she paid for everything she'd done. One of the men stepped forward, a heavy-set figure with a scar running down his cheek. "You're not going to walk away from this," he said gruffly. "Carla's not messing around. She made it clear that you're not leaving here alive." I looked at him, trying to read his expression. But there was no kindness in his eyes, no remorse. Just cold indifference. "I don't care what Carla thinks," I said, my voice steady despite the situation. "You don't know who you're messing with. This isn't over." The man smirked, stepping back. "You're delusional, old man. This is over for you." I felt a sudden rush of panic, but I kept my face neutral. If they were going to hurt me, they would have done it by now. They were stalling, waiting for something. But what? And who else had Carla involved in all of this? Just as the tension in the room was becoming unbearable, I heard the sound of a door creaking open. I turned my head, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw a familiar figure step into the room. Mike. He looked different, his clothes were darker, his face more serious than I'd ever seen it. But there was no mistaking him. He was there. And he wasn't alone. Behind him stood two uniformed officers. "Let him go," Mike said, his voice calm but firm. The men in the room froze, their eyes darting between each other in confusion. I couldn't believe it. Mike had come through for me. "What the hell is this?" the man with the scar demanded. "It's called justice," Mike replied coolly. "I've been investigating your little operation for a while now. You and Carla are both under investigation for a whole host of charges: fraud, extortion, money laundering, you name it. And I'm betting you don't want to find out what happens when you're caught with your hands this dirty." The men looked at each other, realizing too late that they had been outplayed. Mike's presence wasn't a coincidence. He had been one step ahead this entire time. "You're making a mistake," the scarred man muttered, his voice suddenly unsure. "No," Mike said, his voice cold. "You're the ones who made the mistake." The officers moved in, handcuffing the men quickly. As they were escorted out of the building, I looked at Mike, still in shock at how this had all unfolded. How did you know?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly from the adrenaline. "I didn't know for sure," Mike admitted, "but I had a feeling. I've been watching Carla for a while. She's been making some big moves lately, and it wasn't hard to connect the dots. I got a tip about the warehouse, and when I heard about the threats you were getting, I knew it was time to act." I could barely believe it. Mike had known all along that I was in danger, but he had played the long game, waiting for the right moment to strike. "They're going to be locked up for a long time," Mike added, his tone finally softening. "I don't know if that's enough to bring Kevin back, but it'll stop them from hurting anyone else." I nodded, feeling the weight of everything crash down on me. Carla and her accomplices were going to face the consequences of their actions. But even with their arrest, it didn't feel like victory. Not really. Kevin was still gone. And nothing would ever bring him back. I let out a breath, my body finally relaxing as the officers drove the criminals away. Mike stayed with me, keeping me company in the stillness of the warehouse. "We'll get you home, John," Mike said gently, his voice like a lifeline. "It's over. You did what you had to do. And in the end, you're the one who gets to walk away." I nodded, but the truth still stung. There would be no happy ending. No reunion with my son. But Carla had been exposed. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. Author's note: this story isn't just about revenge, it's about the painful road to justice. John's journey shows that even when you feel powerless, the truth has a way of coming to light. Sometimes, it's the people who are closest to us that bring about the greatest harm. But in the end, no one is truly above accountability.